Wakanda forever. So in the last few days, we got the very sad, and I think for the vast majority of people, very unexpected news of Chadwick Boseman passing away. He had been battling cancer, colon cancer, for 4 years, and this was not something that was publicly known. I don't know if, none of his coworkers knew or anything like that, but it certainly had never been made known to the public. So for honestly the bulk of the filmography he's known for, he was in the midst of fighting cancer, and he did succumb to that fight. Now, I by no means am saying that the entirety of Boseman's legacy is Black Panther. That is, however, what I know him from, and it does seem to be what is connecting the hardest for a lot of people in terms of feeling the loss. A character like T'Challa requires so much, because not only do you have to be able to do all the things that you expect of a superhero, you have to be able to physically have that presence and have that certain amount of charisma, but on top of that, if you're going to do T'Challa, you have to exude royalty, that regal sense, if that's going to sell. And he had all that. He had every ounce of what he needed to pull that part off. He was fantastic. And we sadly won't get to see him in the part again. And I hope people won't think it ghoulish that I'm going to address this character. But the thing is, I feel ill-equipped to try and offer a proper tribute to the man. I wish I could. I don't feel like I can. But I can talk about the character that is in many ways his legacy, and what will happen with Black Panther now. Because to my way of thinking, there are basically 4 options open to Marvel. Well, I suppose technically there's 5, but the one I'm not giving any consideration to is the possibility that they do no more Black Panther stuff in any way whatsoever and just don't bring it up. There's no way that happens. Black Panther made $1 billion. It was nominated for Oscars. It was important to a lot of people. They're not just going to have that vanish. So I'm going to go through these not in the order that I think is most, least to most likely to happen or anything like that, but rather the order in the order of how much I would like it to be the way to deal with it. Starting with the one that I want them to do the least, going up to what I personally think would be the best way to move forward at this point. But I have no insider knowledge. I don't know how likely any of these are. Although I think the one I'm putting at the bottom is pretty unlikely. But let's go through these. The first option, because we know the technology now exists, is to bring him back through a body double and CGI. Like they did with Peter Cushing playing Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One, and how they did with some of General Leia's scenes after Carrie Fisher passed for The Rise of Skywalker. I think this is pretty unlikely for a couple of reasons. The first is, in both of those cases, it was a supporting character, an important supporting character, especially in the case of Leia, a character with a lot of legacy that people cared about, but not the lead of the story. That's the first problem. The other is, I think it would feel far more inappropriately morbid and disrespectful than I think it did in either of those cases. And some people have had their arguments as to whether what happened in those two other instances was disrespectful or not. That is a conversation that has come up. But I think the reason it was, by and large, by the mainstream, given a pass in those two instances was, A, Peter Cushing had been gone for a very long time, and that was a novelty, effectively. That was like, whoa, they could do that? Assuming the effect worked for you. And then with Carrie Fisher, we knew she was going to be in this movie. And while they did do some recreation, they did also pull existing footage so that she was appearing in the film at some point, so that it wasn't all this recreation. And it still felt like her, at least for part of it. So there were some balancing acts, and neither is the case with Chadwick Boseman. Not to mention the fact that I think the wound is going to be too fresh. And one could argue that that was the case with Leia as well. But again, between her being a supporting character and there being some footage for them to use in that, I think eased that a little bit. Neither is the case here. I think the technology exists, that they could do it. I think nobody wants them to do it, and I don't think they're foolish enough to try. Second option is to recast the part of T'Challa. Now, the Marvel films have recast before, a couple of times. They recast Rhodey, War Machine. They recast Bruce Banner, the Hulk. But the thing is, the circumstances are very different. In those instances, it was disputes over payment, over creative control, or just not wanting to come back. There was no tragedy underlying those recastings. And one could make a stronger case for this. It's certainly not as ghoulish as, resurrecting Chadwick Boseman through CGI. But I don't think it's a job I wouldn't envy any actor to take, because everyone's going to compare them. And if they don't deliver what people feel like Chadwick Boseman would have delivered, then it's going to get knocked. And even if it does, it's just going to remind people of what they lost. So I think that in this specific instance is a bad idea. I'm not always against recasting. I'm iffy on it. I'm very situational on that. I don't have a blanket statement on it, but I'm not always against it. In this case, I don't think it's going to go well. And I also, again, think that it's going to just be, it's going to read as disrespectful. It's going to read not as we're trying to honor the legacy. It's going to read as we need to keep making money with this character, so hell with it. So that gives us two more options. The first is have the character die in universe. Now, they may or may not decide to actually depict that. Again, there's a risk of coming across as ghoulish for doing so. But if they in some way acknowledge so that there can be, something in universe to give us a sense of the loss, of the absence, whether it's a funeral scene, whether it is just going over the impact on various other characters, and acknowledging it and then sort of moving away from that corner of Marvel. And sort of basically letting Wakanda mourn. That's an option, but I think there's a modification of that, which is the last option. I think this is the best one for a number of reasons. I think it's going to feel the most organic to the situation that we very unfortunately find ourselves in. And there's also some precedent and some basis in the source material to do this. And that is to have Shuri take over the role of the Black Panther. She's actually done it in the comics. And I don't know if T'Challa has ever died in the comics, but he has gone missing. So there are also instances in the comics, one of which my partner Liz and I actually did a review on our podcast, Tough Like a Girl. We did a review of the first volume of Shuri, which deals with Black Panther T'Challa being lost and not being there, and she has to try and figure out how to get him back, which wouldn't be the case here, but also like help run the country in his absence. I think that's their best option because they benefit from Shuri being an established character, a character with very close ties to T'Challa, and they had wonderful, amazing chemistry. I think she could probably do a phenomenal job bringing across that sense of loss, the weight of trying to take on that mantle, probably some reluctance at doing it. I think the best thing for them to do is to have in universe T'Challa is dead. And it's what I don't envy them is figuring out how to do that. And I'm not even going to try and figure that out, because options are you could do something big and spectacular, basically having the CGI suit so you don't have to, recreate his face. You just basically have a stunt double, get blown up or something like that. But that feels very unceremonious. And for my part, I kind of would prefer that we just find out that something happened, that he's gone. And actually, you know what? I am going to make a suggestion. Have him die of cancer. That for all Wakanda's technology, for everything they can do, nobody lives forever. Have it feel as sudden in universe as it did in real life. I'm sorry, I didn't expect to get choked up. I mean, part of this, I've had family members go from cancer, and it can be very quick, at least for your knowledge of it, especially if they're private people. And I feel like whenever cancer gets depicted in something like a superhero universe, it's very drawn out. I think they have an opportunity to acknowledge the other side, where it feels like it came out of nowhere. I think that would be the best way to do it. Have it that he passed away between films, open with a funeral, and have Black Panther 2 be about Shuri trying to live up to his legacy, which would have a meta function, because that is what the film would be trying to do in his absence. And I think that would be the most respectful way to keep the franchise going into the future. It feels really wrong and weird for me to do my usual list of plugs. If you care, there's links in the description. I'm leaving it at that. Chadwick Boseman was gone too soon. I did not know him, but I know his work. I know his legacy. And I hope that he is even better remembered by those who knew him than those of us who only got to watch him on the screen and somehow still felt connected to him. Thank you for watching. Go hug your family.